What's up, internet? This is Pandragon down here. How have you guys all been? Once again, I'm joined here with the absolutely fantastic Morgan Strong Comnet.
Konnichiwa, minasan.
Ah, konnichiwa. How are we today, Morgan?
Well, I'm really excited that summer is here, and we're actually doing something a little different, guys. We're doing something that's not Disney related.
Ooh, shock! Oh, I bet you guys thought
taboo.
I bet you guys thought we ever do Disney stuff, but yeah, sorry to disappoint all you Disney aficionados. We do actually like things other than Disney, but yeah. So as Morgan said, we've got something that's not Disney related, but funny enough, you may have noticed that Morgan spoke Japanese at the beginning here, which funny enough is kind of the theme of what these next two videos are going to be. Morgan, would you like to do the honors?
Well, sure. Something else other than Disney and writing close to Dan and I's heart is we love Japanese culture, especially anime.
Yay.
We love anime.
So yes, this is the first of two videos. We decided to do it in two because we thought one would be way too long, even for the most affectionate of anime fans. But anyway, so what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about my top 5 favourite animes, and then in the next video we will have the lovely Morgan talking about her top 5 animes. So yeah, we've been wanting to do this for like a while, but sadly real life keeps getting in the way of everything.
Blasted life.
Gosh darn real life, how dare you get in the way of us trying to have fun. But anyway, so moving on. So this first video, I'm going to be talking about my top 5 favourite animes. A little bit of a confession I've got to make here. I'm probably not as much of an otaku as, say, Morgan or a few others. The thing is, I'm kind of selective in the sort of animes that I watch, if you understand what I mean. You know, I obviously watched it when I was at school, but back then I don't think anime was really as big as it is now, and it was kind of hard to get hold of a lot of things on video, so I was kind of like relating on borrows from like one of my best friends. But luckily in recent years, the anime has become really, really huge, and it's become a lot easier to view and everything. So, but yeah, I do like anime in the fact that it doesn't always take itself too serious, and it's quite epic and really interesting to watch. So yeah, anyway, so without further ado, let's move on to my 5 favourite animes, and I'm going to start off with a honourable mention, if that's okay with you, Morgan.
Oh, please do. I love honourable mentions.
Okay, because this is actually the latest anime that I've seen, and I think it is probably worth making a mention. This is a quote-unquote Netflix original anime, and by Netflix original, I think it means they just paid the English staff to dub it, because I'm pretty sure it's been out in Japan for like a year or so, but anyway. So my honourable mention will be 7 Deadly Sins.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Yeah. Just for a heads up, I'm not going to say any of the Japanese pronunciations of these because my Japanese is absolutely terrible. So I'm just purely going to be saying the English pronunciations of these. So that way I won't have any angry otakus telling me, oh, you're not saying that right, blah, 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 you know, usual things. But for those of you who don't know, the 7 Deadly Sins is a sort of medieval fantasy style anime. It's sort of set in, I guess you could say, like a medieval England sort of setting, and it's based around these characters called the 7 Deadly Sins. Basically, they were involved in a huge battle with oh, by the way, I should probably mention there may be a few spoilers for these animes I mentioned, so just a head up, guys. If you don't want anything ruined, then please watch at your own risk. But the basic plot of 7 Deadly Sins, it's based around these 7 people, I think who work for the Holy Knights. And supposedly they became criminals after they killed the Holy Master, and now they're kind of hunted as fugitives. But a few years later, Princess Elizabeth is on the hunt for the 7 Deadly Sins to try and stop this evil guy from hurting the father and the Holy Knights from taking over the world, and it kind of just goes on from there. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people have said that it's kind of an inferior version to Fairy Tail, which I've seen kind of on and off, but I don't really think there are too many similarities. I think Fairy Tail is probably a bit more, dare I say, urban fantasy, well, this is kind of more rooted in like the sort of epic fantasy, so I think it pretty much stands out in its own way. As an anime, it's pretty standard, you know, it's got a basic plot, it's got like a shonen sort of hero, it's got like a talking animal, it's got a princess heroine. Well, I use the term heroine loosely, and we'll get to that in a minute. But what I quite like, it does actually make a lot of references to like medieval myth, because King Arthur, believe it or not, appears in it, and so does Merlin, who, again, bit of a spoiler here, Merlin is one of the 7 Deadly Sins, so that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, the plot's pretty basic. It's just basically a group of guys have to defeat the big bag and save the country, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's not as overly complicated as some anime stories, and it's quite easy to follow and quite fun. There are a few problems I have with it, though, and excuse me if I start ranting here. First of all, Meliodas, the main character, he is one of the biggest perverts I've ever seen in any anime, because virtually every episode, he ends up groping Elizabeth. That's a little bit strange to take at first. I mean, he is a good guy at heart, but his perviness kind of gets the better of him sometimes. Well, on the subject of Elizabeth, I just want to say she is one of the most annoying characters I've ever seen in an anime, because she's basically like a damsel in distress, and I mentioned that Meliodas constantly is groping her, and the stupid thing is, she just lets him do it. She just stands there and take it, and I'm like, for God's sake, girl, just whack him around the face. You don't have to take that ball. It's, I don't know. That really I found a bit off-putting at first, and I don't really think it's setting a good message across. But to be fair, Elizabeth's a bit of a stupid character anyway, so maybe she deserves it. And one other problem I kind of have with it is, see, I know a lot of animes come in and they, as the story goes on, they introduce new characters and stuff like that. But the problem I have with this is, like, they tend to introduce characters and they suddenly become important to the plot without any real say-so, if that makes sense.
A lot of animes tend to do that. And yeah, it's kind of wishy-washy.
Yeah, and I know, just seems, I mean, I mentioned King Arthur, and it's kind of this thing with him, like, he suddenly appears in, like, the final battle, and even though he's barely been mentioned, actually, come down, I don't even think he is mentioned at all before he makes an appearance, but it's like, suddenly he becomes vital to the plot, and he's like, oh, well, okay, well, I guess it's King Arthur, so makes sense, but I don't know. Another problem I have with this, and I really don't want to sound like a social justice warrior here, because I just think this show has way too much fan service in it, and normally I actually don't have a problem with fan service if it's done in like a small extent, like going back to Fairy Tail. I know there's a character called Ezra Scarlet, and she has like a lot of different armors, a lot of which are quite revealing and fan servicey. But that I can kind of understand, because like some of her armors are based on the theme of seduction, and she uses it as like a distraction method to defeat her enemies. Here, though, a lot of the characters, they just seem to be made sexy just for the sake of being sexy. I mean, like I'll go back to Merlin, and this one especially. She pretty much just looks like what Cruella de Vil would be if she was a bikini model.
Oh dear.
Yeah, that's the only, and there doesn't seem to be any real reason for it other than she just is. And I will give credit, though, it's not entirely female fan service, because there's a character called Ban who does get his shirt off quite a bit, so I guess that kind of balances it out. One more thing I just want to put across, and this really did kind of I don't quite know how to describe it. There's a storyline featuring Ban and a character called Elaine, who's like a fairy. I think she's like a fairy queen, and she basically guards the Fountain of Youth, which is what made Ban immortal. And throughout the story, it's kind of hinted they have like a romantic relationship. Mm-hmm. Problem with this is Elaine looks about 10 years old, and Ban looks about 20. So yeah, I mean, they kind of get around it by saying that Elaine's a fairy and fairy's like 700 years old, but to be honest, you just look at it and thinking, yeah, that's just creepy lolicon, which I don't know, that just didn't do anything for me. But yeah, I mean, this has a few problems and a few flaws, but on the whole, I think it's actually a pretty decent anime. It does follow a lot of anime cliches in places, but probably no more than a lot of other things. So, but yeah, if you guys want to check it out, it's available on Netflix. And I think they've put the first season on there. They should have the second season coming up fairly soonish. So yeah, go through and check it out. Let's move on. And this top 5 might seem a bit strange compared to what a lot of top 5 animes are, but do bear with me in this one, guys. Hopefully there should be one that you should like on here. Okay, so my number 5, and it was pretty obvious I was going to put like a card game related anime on these sort of things, because it's pretty much a staple in a lot of anime. But here's one a lot of you guys may not know about. So number 5, we have Future Card Buddyfight.
I don't know, but I like the word bunny.
It's Buddy, not Bunny.
Oh, darn, never mind. No, all right. I would like to learn about. I like card animes.
Excellent. Well, this one is based on the card game done by Bushiroad, who also did like the card game Cardfight Vanguard, which I tried to get into. I just found it a little bit too overly complicated, but luckily this one's actually quite easy to pick up, and it's sort of like a cross between Yu-Gi-Oh! And I guess Pokemon and a few other card games, but no, it's quite fun. I'd say it's probably one of the more underrated card games out there, but no, it's quite fun. But anyway, so the anime follows a character called Gal Mikado, who basically is just Yugi Moto from Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually, to be fair, quite a lot of the characters in there, you can just look and say, yep, that's Kaiba, yep, that's Joey Wheeler. Yeah, that's Pegasus. But anyway, the basis of Buddyfight is essentially you get a monster called a buddy monster, and the idea is you join forces and fight with them on the battlefield, which is kind of a nice idea. And in the first series of the anime, basically Gal gets a buddy called Drum Bunker Dragon, who's like this big dragon knight, and the first series is basically them going to try and fight in a tournament to become the best buddy fighter ever, and there's also like this evil guy that wants to try and take over the world. You know, the usual fare you get in card games, but yeah, it's what I kind of like about this anime is that sometimes the stories can be very flat and the writing can be extremely inconsistent, but unlike Yu-Gi-Oh, I don't necessarily think it takes itself too seriously, and you know, it has a lot of really silly humor to it, as you probably expect, but you know, a lot of the story you can take with a bit of a pinch of salt, but pretty cool. It does actually have some pretty funny characters in it as well. My personal favourite is a character called Tatsuya, who's basically like this Justin Bieber sort of hip dancer. He has, in my opinion, one of the best character themes ever. If you want to Google it, just have a check it out. But it is a really fun... It's something I actually like to put on to when I'm feeling down, need a bit of a pick-me-up. It's got a nice vibe and a beat to it, but... Also, what's quite funny is he pulls bananas out of his hair, so don't ask. Actually, come to think of it, there's quite a lot of cool characters that have, like, pretty weird hair in this, even for anime standards. Like, I think the head teacher of the school, he's got, like, a hair that's actually shaped like a fist.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
I need to watch it for the hair now.
Definitely. And also, I also quite like it. It makes a lot of references to, like, popular films and TV shows. Like, there's this one character that says in a French accent, "Now go away or I shall taunt you a second time."
Oh,
yeah. Definitely
Monty
Monty Python. Now, just like with Seven Deadly Sins, there are a couple of problems I have with it. First things being, the characters are some of the most gullible and unobservant I've ever seen in an anime. Like, here's just one example. One of the main villains is a character called Shido, and he's like the class president, because it's set in a school mostly, and the main villain is a character called Shido. Well, he's not a main villain, but he's a villain. And his evil persona is Death Shido. So, you know, he makes absolutely no attempt to hide his identity. And, you know, all he has to put on a mask and that's it. And yet somehow the heroes can never put two and two together and work out that he and Death Shido are the same person. And even when they do discover he's like Death Shido, it's like, oh my gosh, I never would have guessed. Seriously, how could you not tell he was the same person? Even a blind monkey could have told the difference.
It's probably poking fun at, like, the Superman mentality.
True, I suppose, but that just kind of annoyed me because it makes some really stupid plot choice. But yeah. Now, in fairness to it, this show does get a lot better in the second series, because the second series, they kind of do away with the card game sort of thing, bringing this monster called Yami-Geto, who's basically like this evil monster that's trying to eat and destroy Earth and everything. That was actually pretty good. It had some pretty dark moments, and they actually even killed off a couple of characters as well.
Oh, no.
Well, I say killed off. I guess it's more like they were sent to the Shadow Realm, as I believe 4 kids would have said, and they came back at the end. But actually, it generally was actually dark, and it actually had some pretty sad stories on there. Like, this is one of the saddest stories, and actually, this generally got me in the feels. There's like a monster called Count Dawn, who's like a vampire character, and again, spoilers follow. Sort of a running joke with him is, as he's a vampire, he disintegrates at the sight of the sun, and mostly that's done for like comic effect. But then we have like a flashback of when he was on a mission with one of his buddy police. In this context, they've got these things called the buddy police that try to stop illegal monsters coming through. But during one mission, he and his best friend were like severely wounded. And basically he was trying to get his friend to like medical attention. But then the sun came up and Count Dawn disintegrated. So it means his friend died. Yeah, that actually, and as part of that, he kind of watches over his friend's family as sort of a way of protecting them. And I actually generally thought that was a really well thought out story. And I have to be honest, I wasn't actually, for sure, that kind of is kind of silly and over the top. I actually wasn't expecting it. So, you know, fair play to them. But anyway, now I'm moving on to my second complaint about this, the third series, because it's coming on its third series. Basically, they've gone back to the tournament sort of setting, and you see, I actually don't know if this is supposed to be like a third series or a reboot, because they really have nerfed the character of Gal Mikado. Because it's like, in the first 2 series, I think the fans complained that he was way too perfect because he kept on winning every game he came across. You know, sort of like your typical shonen hero, he wins at everything.
Oh, yeah.
But to be fair, he did lose a couple in the second series, but in this series, he's actually lost a couple of fights for the most asinine reason ever. Like, there's one match where he goes into a game without a buddy, and he says, "Oh, I can win a fight without a buddy." And yet he's always said in the previous series that him and his buddy are one and the same, and he could never fight without them. And yet somehow he completely forgets about this in this fight. Okay, I understand you want to make him a less OP character, but don't make him a flipping noob. I don't know, it's just stupid. Oh, and his new buddy, Bal Dragon, he is just, oh my god. Well, if you thought Scrappy Doo was annoying, then you trust me, he's Scrappy Doo times 1,000. Oh my god, yeah.
Enough said.
Yeah, enough. I'm saying nothing, but I mean, yeah. I suppose to sum up, it is pretty much a an extended commercial for the card game, but yeah, as far as card game anime goes, it's pretty cool, and it's actually not that hard to get either. It's pretty much they've got like a YouTube channel, so you just need to go onto YouTube, and they've got like an entire channel dedicated to it. One word of a note for those of you who prefer like English dubs over subtitles, they've actually stopped doing the English dub version, purely doing the subtitle versions. I don't know why that is, whether the voice actors they use are on strike or something, but well, see, that's what I heard, but then they still actually use English voice actors for their advertisements for their games, so I don't quite know the reason, but just a bit of a heads up on there. Yeah. Anyway,
Great.
so that's my number 5, Future Card Buddyfight. Maybe a bit of an odd choice, but I kind of like it because I play the card game as well, so it kind of teaches me a few tricks and stuff from that. So that's my number 5. Okay, so now moving on to number 4, and I'm kind of going old school here, because I think if any TV series, when the anime shows like the over-the-top and really stupidly violent bit of anime, then it's this one. So this one may get a bit bloody here. Number 4, we have Fist of the North Star.
Derek likes that one.
Hokuto no Ken, I think it is. I know I said I wouldn't try the Japanese pronunciations, but I think I'll give it a try for that one. This technically, I think, was actually the first anime series. Well, not the first anime series I ever saw. That comes later, but I think this is like the first adult anime series I ever saw, because basically my friend lent me the film, and I thought the film was like pretty cool. So then I found it was a TV series, so I checked it out, and yeah, I kind of liked it. I mean, there's virtually no plot to it, but what it is, it's just over-the-top action. It's one of those animes you kind of have to take with a bit of a pinch of salt. Just for the benefit of those who haven't seen it, basically it's set in like a dystopian future / Mad Max sort of environment. And the main character is called Kenshiro, who's a master of this martial art called Hokuto Shinken. Essentially, it's like a martial art that attacks the power points in people's bodies. And what he does is, when he hits them, he can overload them with a vast amount of chi. And mostly he does this to make them explode, but he can also control their body parts and do other stuff. And he's even got this technique that can make 2 characters hug themselves to death. I'm seriously not making that up.
That sounds delightful.
I mean, basically, he's like what Bruce Lee would be if he was a Kryptonian. But it's kind of iconic in its own way because one of his special techniques is the 100 crap fist in the North Star. And that's when he punches his opponent like really, really fast. You get like a flurry of punches, and you've pretty much seen that in every anime ever, but I think this is what popularized it. But, you know, it's quite cool. So anyway, the quote-unquote story is basically Ken has to try and save his girlfriend from a guy called Shin, who basically, I guess you could say, is like the Hitler of this world. He's like a master of Nanto Seiken, which is like another version of martial art. And throughout the story, he ends up meeting people that are like getting attacked by bandits, and he just basically ends up going around nuking everyone. So I mean, it's pretty violent over the top, and if you're easily squeamish, I wouldn't recommend it. But if you just want your action, then yeah, I think it's pretty badass. Again, though, I do have a couple of problems with it. I'm picking these as my top 5, but just because they're in my top 5, it doesn't mean I can't see some fault in them in some way. But anyway, my problem I have with Kenshiro is I think he's like a total Mary Sue, because, you know, nothing can take him down. You know, I mean, if you thought the guy in One Punch Man was OP, this guy's super OP, because it's like, even when he goes up against a villain that's got like superhuman powers or stuff like that, he always conveniently has a technique that like can counter it. I don't know if you've ever done like live action role play or something like Dungeons and Dragons, and there's always that one person that just refuses to die, so they always have to keep making up rules to stop their characters from dying. But that's pretty much Kenshiro. Yeah. Although, to be fair, the characters he fights, of course, are pretty nasty, so I guess it's not a bad thing that he's kind of OP, but I don't know. That's just one of my complaints about it. But in its defense, there is one thing about this anime I do enjoy, and that's actually, believe it or not, one of the villains.
Oh, yeah?
Now, generally, the villains in Fist of the North Star don't really have a lot of backstory. It's more like they're evil, and that's pretty much all you need to know. But there's one particular character in it called, see if I can pronounce his name now. I think it's Souther or Thowther. I don't quite know how you're supposed to pronounce it. But basically, like Kenshiro, he's a master of this special martial art, and it's called like the Phoenix Fix. I think it's like an offshoot of Nanto Seiken, but he has his own army, and he's pretty badass. I mean, I've heard his first fight with Kenshiro. Kenshiro asks him why he doesn't take a stance, and Souther just replies, because a stance implies defense, and my attack is only offense. Yeah, and in actual fact, he's one of the only people in arguably the whole series that can actually outright defeat Kenshiro.
Nice.
Yeah, there was actually a legitimate reason for it, because like I mentioned, Kenshiro's attacks involve like attacking certain body parts and like power points. But Souther, he was actually born, and I've checked this, apparently is a thing. He was actually born with like his body parts reversed. So where his organs are, they're not in the same place. So naturally, where his power points are, they're not in the same place. So essentially, he's pretty much immune to Kenshiro's attacks. Well, at least at first. But also, he has, in my opinion, I think one of the most tragic backstories of any villain. And believe it or not, I actually took this as like inspiration for one of the characters in my books. You'd be surprised to hear. So essentially, when he was young, he and his teacher, I don't know if his teacher actually was his father, but they had sort of like a father-son relationship, and he was teaching him the art of the Phoenix Fist. The problem with the Phoenix Fist is, much like with Hokuto Shinken, there can only be one practitioner. But in the case of the Phoenix Fist, the original owner has to be killed, and it's sort of like a passing of the torch, if that makes sense.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, Souther, for his final test, he was blindfolded. And bear in mind, I think he was only about 12, 13 at this point. But anyway, he got into a fight with an unknown opponent, and he did actually end up killing him. It wasn't until he removed his blindfold he realised he was actually fighting and killed his master.
Aww.
Yeah. And this basically broke his heart, and he made a vow never to love again. So essentially, he's become really cold and like really. I guess he's kind of similar to Lotso from Toy Story in that way. Like, he had his heart broken, he kind of became cold and nasty. But this is the interesting thing, because throughout the anime, he is actually building a pyramid and sort of in honor of his master. And in his final fight with Kenshiro, when Kenshiro basically works out what his strategy is, he gives him actually a surprisingly merciful death. I forget the actual technique, but a technique that makes his heart slow down so he'll die peacefully. Yeah.
Whatever makes it better, I guess.
I know, I mean, he'll happily nuke everyone else, but this guy, apparently, he'll give him a merciful death. But in all seriousness, just before Souther dies, he goes by the statue of his master, and he actually breaks down crying. He does like this one line saying, "Master, please let me feel your love one last time." And I have to be honest, again, this is something that took me by surprise. In an anime that's pretty much like full-on violence, it's actually nice to have like a tender moment like this. This is kind of emphasized by Kenshiro's final words, where he said his love is stronger than anyone. So it's not that Souther couldn't love, it's that he loved too much. But yeah, I mean, other than that, like I say, if you just want like a straightforward, over-the-top violent anime that doesn't require too much thinking, then this is really good. And I'd also recommend checking out the anime film, but there's also a live-action film, which I suggest you avoid like the play, because it is just dreadful.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. I mean, the only good thing I can say about the live-action film is it has Malcolm McDowell in it, and that's it.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to my number 3. And again, I'm going kind of old school here. This anime is what happens when you combine 3 of my favourite things in the world. That's my favourite warrior, my favourite type of food, and my favourite animal. What do you get when you combine those 3? You have samurai pizza cats.
Oh my gosh, you made me choke on my drink.
But
I always forget that's an anime, because I remember that being on Saturday morning cartoon.
It was, in actual fact, that's how I found out. And technically, this is actually the first anime I ever got into, and I really enjoyed it, because it's like, for those who haven't seen it, it was like a quite an old anime that came out in, I don't know if it was like the late 80s, early 90s.
It was late 80s, because it was on like reruns when I was in the 90s, and I was a little girl. So.
Okay, that's fair enough. As the name suggests, it's about a group of characters who are cats who just happen to be samurais that deliver pizza. What more could you want than that? And it's sort of done in like I guess you could say like a Power Rangers Sailor Moon sort of style, when they fight a monster of the week, and they fight generally huge mecha monsters and other things like that. So it's pretty much a straightforward affair, but it's just so over the top and silly. It's just crazy. But I also quite like it. The main enemy is like a group of ninja crows and like a I dare say overly camp cyborg fox that explodes when he gets angry. So. I remember it actually being quite fun. This is basically what I completed my Saturday mornings, just getting in front of the TV and watching Samurai Pizza Cats. And Oh, I love this show. It's brilliant. Now, interestingly enough, it's a well-known fact that, well, I'd say it's a well-known fact, but if you talk to a lot of anime fans, 9 times out of 10, it's generally accepted that the Japanese version is far superior to the English dub because generally when they do like the English dub, they tend to like localize it more for like their audiences and stuff like that.
Right.
Samurai Pizza Cats, though, I think the opposite is true, believe it or not, and there's actually a good reason for it. From what I heard, is when they sent the original tapes across to the American company to dub it, they forgot to send transcripts across of the dialogue. So as such, the dubbers had no idea what the plot was. So they essentially did what anyone would do in that situation, make up their own plot. Now, whilst that would normally be detrimental to a lot of shows, this I actually think made it work in its favour. Because from what I understand, the Japanese version is a lot more serious in tone, and there's not a lot of humour behind it, despite it being quite silly. Because let's face it, Samurai Pizza Cats, you can't really take that seriously. Let's not kid ourselves here. So yeah, I think it's quite, it's really over the top cartoonish humour, but I really liked it. One problem, I never saw the end of it.
Aww.
Well, basically, the last episode I remember seeing, it was like they were going up against the, I guess you could say, the evil doppelganger villains. They were like ninja crows that had similar powers to the Pizza Cats, and essentially they beat the living crap out of them. You know, they completely destroyed them, and it was left on a cliffhanger. And no joke, I waited an entire week because I really wanted to find out how the Pizza Cats would come back from that.
Aww.
I don't know if it was cancelled, they ran out of episodes, but they just stopped showing it.
Oh, no.
And I never found out if they won or not. I mean, I don't know how many episodes they did release, but I never found out what the ending was. So that really bugged me. It still bugs me even to this day. So, I mean, I probably could find the ending of it online and stuff like that, but I don't know. It's just like, it would have been nice if I got some closure back then. You know,
Sure.
it's not going to give the 12-year-old any closure, put it that way.
Aww.
But yeah, so if you just want a really funny and over the top thing and don't really care about plot and just want to have a good laugh, then you should check out this show. The intro alone is hilarious. I'm not sure if it was ever released on DVD, but I'm sure it's probably shown on Crunchyroll or online or somewhere like that. So
Yeah, it's on either Crunchyroll, Hulu, or Netflix. I've seen it somewhere.
yeah, but yeah, I'd definitely recommend checking it out. It's really, really funny.
I vaguely remember it in reruns. I only watched like a few episodes growing up because I'm a little bit younger than you. But it's that good, 80s, 90s hokey anime.
What
It's
more
great.
could you ask for?